Welcome to Better Relationships, Better Work, where we explore how to make work better through the power of relationships. My name's Jason Lauritsen. I'm the author of 2 books, a leadership trainer, and speaker on a mission to fix how we treat people at work. Now, in today's episode, we cover 2 important topics that both happen to start with the letter P: patience and priorities. We discuss the reality that relationships really can't be forced and that patience is often required. But patience alone isn't enough. You also have to prioritize showing up for your people, demonstrating your commitment to the relationship over time. Now, we unpack what this means both in friendships and as a leader at work. And I do all of this with this week's guest, Dawn Burke. Dawn is an HR and leadership consultant, an executive coach, and a speaker and facilitator. She's a former HR executive who earned a reputation for her very human and practical approach to HR leadership. Now, if you're an animal lover, you're going to love this episode because Dawn shares a great story about a relationship lesson she actually learned through her experience with a feral cat that she took in. It's pretty awesome. So please enjoy my conversation with Dawn Burke. Dawn, thank you so much for joining me to have this conversation.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. It's been way too long. We'll leave it at that. It's been too long, and there's been so many things that happened.
It's always too long. It's always too long. So I get to catch up a little bit with you as we do this. So we're going to start by getting to know you a little bit and getting to know a little bit about how you think about relationships, maybe what your relationships or relational style is. And the question I'm going to start with you is, what's something that you learned about relationships when you were growing up as a kid that still shapes how you think about relationships today?
It's interesting. I was thinking about this. I mean, I'm going to let people peek behind the curtain. You gave me a little heads up on the question, so I did think through it a little bit. Growing up, I don't believe there was a whole lot of lessons learned at the time. It was really about what was modeled to me. Any lessons that I would have learned at that time, or I would have had exposure to, I wouldn't learn the lesson until I'm many decades old on this planet, right? But what was modeled to me, even if it wasn't intentional, was a sense of security. My father was somebody who never met a stranger, was very, very charismatic, but also very authentic. And my mom was somebody who, whether intentional or not, was always there to listen to me or to my sister throughout all the years. She wasn't one that was like, tell me about how you're feeling, honey, and let's read a book and let's get this theory out there. It was just, she was there. And those 2 things really did shape much of my growing up. Now, rest assured, growing up was a hot mess in so many ways, as it is for everybody. But those were the 2 things modeled to me, and that stuck with me. Like, I never understood bullying. I never understood exclusion, like, I'm more the merrier to a degree. So, but those were really important. And I think that was something that I very much benefited from.
Sounds like it. Those are good things to carry with you. As you think about your close relationships, friendships, the people that you hold nearest, what is the quality you value most in a friend?
Okay, that's a really big, wide question, but I will say that I value prioritization, making me a priority and vice versa. That doesn't mean that they have to be there all the time. It might be like with you. I haven't seen you in many years, but I know that I could pick up the phone at any time. And if I said, Jason, I need to talk to you about something, or I'm struggling with this, or, hey, this great thing happened, I just know you'd pick up the phone. Their relationships can be very fragile, and they can break apart in a second. Like, for instance, there's a move, somebody moves. This is work and life, by the way. It could be that, an experience happened. It could be a variety of things. And some of the best people that you meet in life, you just slowly drift apart because of just natural things. Or now, because you have such access to remote ways of communicating, like we didn't have in the day. Oh, I'm, Odie Oldstein here. That if you don't prioritize it, then it's, it's just not a fruitful relationship, and it has to go both ways, for sure. And rest assured, there's a lot of other lessons and kind of foundational things that I think it's important for people to know before they even decide they're going to prioritize a certain relationship one way or the other.
I hear in that too a little bit of, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but in prioritization, it sounds like there's a little bit of like, it's kind of commitment and intention sort of married together a little bit, is what I'm hearing.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a few things. I believe there's a lot of people who want to be intentional or want to keep up the relationship. But one thing I read a really interesting article, because we're talking about work and life and whatnot. I read an article in the Atlantic just over this week. And one of the articles was about people who are addicted to success. They're success addicts. And this was in a really real sense. It wasn't, hyperbole or anything like that. And I realized throughout COVID, as I unwound and then had time to reflect and really change a lot of things, especially one of the things I got really, really educated on was behavioral change and habit change. And one of the things that I realized was I had to get clear on what was keeping me from deprioritizing making an effort for connection with folks. I've lived in a neighborhood at that point. I've lived in the neighborhood for 8 years, and I didn't know but 3 of my neighbors because I was always working. And what I learned, and I think this is up your alley, Jason, when we're talking about prioritization of friendship, if we're talking about creating shared experiences, if we're talking about so many things, patience, intention, really it comes down to us trying to figure out why is it that we even care? What do we want out of it? And usually what we are craving, our brain is craving a dopamine fix. There's something that we want from the relationship, whether it's achievement, like this was me trying to grab for success. The problem with that is it never ends. The way we are in America, valuing success and constant work, and that's just foundational, right or wrong. I realized a lot of that was driven by me wanting to be validated and me continuing to get this dopamine rush from not really the result, but from me thinking about the reward I was going to get. So what does that mean? You kind of look at that as with friends as well. But you want the dopamine rush. First, you want to prioritize it. Like, is that something that is worth me prioritizing work to that degree? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But I think many people would say, reflecting back, it hasn't been worth it to the extent we've done it. But we don't know why we're doing it. So if we just now take that same sentiment with our friends, I want that dopamine rush to be because I feel good with this person, because this person brings me joy, because they trust me that I'm going to be there for them, because there's somebody who's going to really be okay with me being really weird, very authentic, liking weird stuff, hating licorice. We create an environment where I look forward to that relationship, which gives me that reward I want. The problem is throughout life, we don't really even we're not conscious of who we are, what we want. So we kind of bounce around with relationships and we learn a lot and all that's good. And it's not though until you're older, I feel, that you really realize like when to hold them, when to fold them, walk away, when to run. I think a Stoic philosopher said that, by the way. That's okay. We learn from it. But a lot of people don't learn from it. And I think it can be a little kinetic and have not as deep relationships.
I like that as a starting point. Thank you for sharing that. But as a starting point, like if you want better relationships, then you have to prioritize having better relationships. That's a pretty good jumping off point. So thank you for that. Now I gave you a bit of homework. heading into this, I asked you to think about a couple of relationships in your life that we could explore, mine for lessons that we could maybe bring back to work and use to make work better. The first relationship I asked you to think about was a personal relationship, one that in your life that feels strong and healthy and positive. And so, what relationship did you come prepared to talk about?
Okay, well, first of all, we're going to table my husband. So if you guys are connected to me in any way, shape, or form, he fills all these boxes. So we're going to put him to the side. So when I thought about a positive relationship, I'm very fortunate that I have quite a few because we were all of us intentional about staying together, keeping in touch. That said, there's one that I've had who a lifelong friend from high school, college. There are times we didn't see each other for a while, but then over the last years we've been back together, and she clicks off all those boxes that I just talked about. I think when I again talk about the foundational things of good relationships, one thing that is important when you're talking about honing a relationship is continuing to strive to create shared experiences that are relatable. I mean, that's why we become friends with folks at work, the shared experience. That's why we become friends with people we were in sports teams with, or in school, or at a conference somewhere. It's shared experiences that we both benefit from and like. When the shared experience goes away, like let's say somebody quits work and you don't see them, well, it's hard to keep that up. But we, for our whole lives, have continued to be there for each other. And in times that have been quite difficult, frankly, in times that have been really, really great. I think one of the things when I talk about foundational things, though, is, people always say you have to be patient and you have to do these. Of course, there's patience. And I'm going to talk about patience because it's something that I didn't have a lot of. I'm better about it now. And I didn't realize, you're going to laugh at me, I did not realize the fundamentals of patience until a feral cat showed up at our house, probably about 18 months ago. Skin and bones, husband fed him. He thought that the cat would go away. No, that cat stayed. I was going to make sure that cat had a great life, etc. Eventually we got it neutered, the whole thing. But this cat was skittish. This cat would have wanted to be around, but could not be touched, did not want any of that. And this went on for months. And at some point you're like, I want to pick that cat up. You can kind of manipulate or force relationships. I hate the word manipulate, but force relationships in different settings. You don't realize you're forcing it, but you're kind of not, there might be people that you don't jive with a lot, but you want to kind of be around them and stuff. And you're able to kind of wiggle your way in. With a cat, you cannot. You cannot wiggle your way in. So it wasn't until many months later that the cat got really sick. And I have a little house for him and heating pads and stuff. And I went to the vet almost crying, got medicine for him, brought it back. And then I fed him and healed him and whatnot for a week and 10 days. It was after that, when he trusted me, he started to come out. And I couldn't force it. I was frustrated with the cat for not being like cuddly. I was frustrated with the cat for not letting me catch him. But the thing is that he couldn't be manipulated. He couldn't be forced. He could claw at me. He could run away. But he trusted me after that time, the rest is history. So I have found in work relationships, sometimes I had to force them. I don't know why, but I did. Personal relationships. Hey, this person doesn't make me feel great about myself. I don't hate them. They're kind of cool to hang out with. But there's something that's not right there. So why am I forcing it? And that's really been on me. So patience is huge. If you can't weather that with somebody, like my very, very good friend who weathers it with me, then likely that relationship is probably not going to be as sustainable as you would like for it to be. So patience, huge with my friend. Shared experience, patience, etc.
Well, and it sounds like and we'll come back to this. But within that patience there's patience, but you also have to keep showing up.
Yes.
Right. Because you have to have the patience for, you keep showing up, you keep doing the work, you keep investing in that relationship, investing in the trust, that if you have the patience to let it build, that in time, then that relationship will come back to you or you'll benefit from it. And so I think that's a really good lesson, and probably, like you said, a hard lesson for some of us to learn that are not naturally gifted with patience.
Oh, absolutely. But I think what you brought up a good point. It's about continually showing up, regardless of things not being perfect. Again, there has to be something you like about this person to keep showing up. I mean, there's those foundational things where you love the person and you trust them. But the patience for them to act a certain way, or to behave a certain way, or to validate you a certain way, it just simply cannot be forced. And it certainly won't work if you're not already clear in your own head about why you need this validation. But we all go through this. It's not until, again, you're 40, 50 where it kind of goes, okay, well, maybe this is why. Oh, I'm not 50, by the way. I'm 52.
I was going to comment earlier, you don't seem to age, Dawn, which is an amazing thing. So kudos. You'll share those secrets in another podcast, perhaps.
Yeah, it's called just having fun.
All right, that's good. I like that. This webcast is sponsored by my longtime friends at Inspiring Workplaces. Now, if you are someone who's working to create an engaging and inspiring workplace for your employees, and of course you are, that's why you're here, then listen up. Inspiring Workplaces is a global community of tens of thousands of HR and employee experience professionals that you can join for free. As a member, you will gain access to thousands of articles and videos and podcasts and events that will help you change the world by changing the world of work. They are also home to the Inspiring Workplaces Awards that recognize the best workplaces in the world. You can learn about the application process at their website. So please go visit inspiring-workplaces.com to learn more and to join the community. That's inspiring-workplaces.com. All right, so let's talk about now your work relationship. And so I asked you to think about a relationship that you formed through work that has had a significant positive relationship on you or your career. And so what relationship are you going to share with us here?
Well, I've also been fortunate that I have a lot of folks at work who I'm proud to say, we're still friends. And the whole back and forth in the work world of, can a boss, leader, HR person really be friends with somebody? And I think to a good extent, you absolutely can be. There's a lot of variables there. The biggest one being, well, at some point I might have some amount of control over you. Doesn't mean I want it, but based on the work, based on the role. And that usually is a big problem for sustainable relationships. It's not cohesive. That's not a good thing. But there are people, if you're clear on expectations, and that's where people go wrong at work. Oh, in life too. We have an expectation, and then the reality is not the same. We don't want to accept that reality. And that's the change piece where we're like, this doesn't work for me. But if you have those expectations, in addition to the shared experiences, the trust, the belief, I have one person in mind who I could say, this is a person that always had my back, was okay to tell me, you got spinach in your teeth in this project. So how about this? And because we trusted each other, I knew that, and that's another thing I'll talk about in a minute. I knew that the criticism was not mean-spirited. I trusted it as opposed to get appalled by it, or retract from it, or get insulted by it. And so it was the building of trust, both ways. It was showing up both ways. It was also going out on a limb in front of other people for you. So this person did that for me a few times. They sponsored me, they supported me. Again, this was a person who held some more power than I did. They mentored me, and that I then modeled to the folks that I led as well. So, and those are the folks who I'm still very close with, because all of those boxes were checked. And there was an equilibrium that was established in spite of the working hierarchy. So I think in work, it's very much like life: shared experiences, trust, authenticity, prioritization. Okay, let's keep going back. Prioritization, again, is probably the number one thing that we have to keep focusing on. But going to bat for you publicly, prioritizing time and mentorship, and paying it forward, telling you things that are hard truths, but in a way that you trust. That's what this person did for me. So, I'm probably talking in a circle, but you can edit that part out.
No, that's that. There's lots of good stuff in there, and I think it naturally leads us to kind of transitioning into thinking about how do we take this stuff, these lessons and insights that you've shared here, and apply those to work, whether that's how we think broadly about the employee relationship we're creating, or whether it's from a leadership role. And where I'll start there is, this prioritization thing is like a great insight and an important insight. And so when you think about that, if we think about work, and I'm thinking, we think about if I'm a manager or leader of a team, or if I am an HR person thinking about how to foster a better work experience, what does prioritization look like in terms of what we want our managers and leaders to do with their people? How would you help them think about creating that or leaning into that with their people?
Okay, this is going to be simple. Prioritize time with them one-on-one. Again, that's the, this is the age-old issue that even good managers really struggle with. I don't think it's a lack of caring about sharing your time with your direct reports, but the bottom line is that many fail miserably because they're overworked, because they don't know how to. They never learned skills to be a manager. They're not good with one-on-ones. So they don't do it. They have the philosophy of, hey, if you don't hear from me, then everything's great. You can choose, have a little more control and set a little more boundaries about what's keeping you from prioritizing time with your employees to connect with them. And just simply do it. The rewards will be 100-fold. And I think that's also true in so many ways. We have to always go back and think about what is keeping us from doing things in a way that we know would probably work better, or why do we do things not knowing that there's another way to work better? And a lot of the times we have no idea. And until we have a strong idea of why that's important, probably going to flounder. And of course, we can talk about the modern workforce. Now, the modern workforce now is like 20 years old, 20 years of this, who's wanted this, but they want to be heard. They want to be validated. They want to feel trust. They want to have autonomy and agency. That's a lot they want, but start with giving them your time.
One of the things I'm reflecting on as you talk about prioritization, and you run into, because I run into the same thing all the time, is this issue of, I don't have time for all these one-on-ones, or I don't have time, which is what you're talking about. And how do I do that? And you are suggesting, rightly so, that you have agency over your calendar. You get to choose. There's a bunch of area in there. And I think in the word prioritization is the solution. Prioritize means put first. So what that means is you put those, right? You make a commitment to that time with your people first, fill in everything else after.
Yeah.
Right. That if you do that and if you're religious about your calendar, once you put it in the calendar, then it's there. And then it becomes something that is much easier to live around. So that's a tactic I always offer up, is just book those meetings first, get them on your calendar, and then fill the rest of the space however you're going to fill the space. You can have discipline or not about that, but prioritize means do first, right? Get it in there first. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Interrupt real quickly, is that then goes back down to what I was talking about that I've been working on myself and quite passionate about learning more, is again about behavior change and creating new habits. It takes us rewiring our brain to at some point prioritize that, to not procrastinate, to say, really rechange our way of thinking and holding a mirror up to ourselves in a way of why am I doing this? What reward am I getting by not prioritizing this thing? Is it because I then have better relationship with the CEO or somebody else? Many things. Is it because I can't manage my own calendar? Is it because of X, Y, Z? And then you look at the reward. Is the reward I'm getting good? And is the result I'm getting from my employees worth not fixing this? That takes habit change. And I know I've heard you speak on habit change many times. That takes a rewiring, literally, physically, of your brain to redo that. And Jason, I want to ask you, when we talk about prioritization with I don't have time, I don't know many people, including myself for a while, that would actually say to somebody who had more control over me or needed me of, hey, right now I've got some stuff scheduled with my employees to get them on track with XYZ project. Can I see you in 3 hours? Now, the answer might be a resounding no. Well, and then you reconfigure. But a lot of people don't even ask. They just immediately go into the kinetic, I need success, I'm addicted to it, I have a reward system that's a little different. And I know that's really deep, but I mean, we talk about it all the time, people don't change. So that's why I do think you have to look at it at a deeper level.
I agree. And I think what you're hinting at there is something that I don't know why or where this came from for me, but I sort of inherently or intuitively picked up somewhere along the lines that both in our personal relationships and work relationships is that we teach people how to treat us. And so when your boss says, hey, do you have a minute? And you say yes, and you run up there immediately, well, then you've just set an expectation with your boss that when they ask you to jump, you're already on the way down by the time you're there. Now, if your boss asks you if you have a minute, you say, not right now. How urgent is it? Is it end of day? Is it in the next hour? Like, how soon do you need to see me? Then most of the time they'll be like, well, here's what I'm looking at. Not that urgent. We can talk tomorrow. Well, now all of a sudden you've set a very different precedent with that individual as to how they're going to treat you. And so I recognize it's not always that simple, but I think it does then boil down to, and we're not going to be able to tackle this today, but what it is about boundaries. It's about being able to set and hold boundaries. And I understand that's a complicated thing that we would need an entire probably season of a podcast to talk about this appropriately. And there are other people that probably have talked about it more skillfully, but I think you're right. That's a really important thing for us to do. But I think you nailed it, is if we go back to sort of the essence of what you shared with us today, is that if you want better relationships with others, then you have to prioritize having better relationships with others, whether that's your friends or your spouse or the people you manage. You've got to make time and you've got to keep showing up. That is really powerful. And I think if you follow that simple advice, you'll have better relationships in all parts of your life.
That's right. And I know you want to wrap this up, but I'm going to give you one follow-up to what you said that I think is
Go important. For it.
It is about setting boundaries, but we also have to ask ourselves, why is it that when such and such calls, I put everything down and run to it? Well, guess what? I also want that validation from my boss. I want their time. I want their ear. I want them to, at least in some way give me some indication that I'm important. And usually, when we do that to others and we jump to somebody else, it's because they haven't necessarily given us that time as well. And so again, that's where I think it's just secular. And I will wrap it with that. So
I agree. That's a great point. And I think it's what I'm hearing underneath that is, and you've said this, is just pause and notice what's happening, right? Notice what's happening so that maybe you can start interrupting that cycle. If you're craving validation, great. Acknowledge that, know it, and then you can make a decision based on what do you want to do next. Do you go chase that dopamine hit this way, or do you go find it in a different place? So I think that's also incredible advice. Dawn, I knew you'd be full of goodness and great wisdom, and so I appreciate you being here. It was delightful to catch up. Thank you for sharing all of this with me. It was really good to see you.
oh my gosh, thank you. This is one of the first times I've jumped back in to some of these things since, the great pandemic, et cetera. And I'm glad it was with you. So great to see you.
All right. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. More importantly, I hope you learned something from the episode that can help you right away. Now, if you'd like to reflect on what you can learn from your own healthy, positive relationships to make work better, I've included a link in the description below where you can access and download what I call the relationship reflection exercise. This includes the same questions that I ask each of my guests to reflect on prior to our conversation on the webcast. Also, if you found today's episode valuable, I'd ask 3 quick favors of you. Number 1, please like the episode. By liking the video and adding a comment if something spoke to you or stood out to you as really significant, you give me some great and valuable feedback, but you also help others find the video. I'd also ask you to subscribe to the channel. That does 2 important things. 1, it makes sure that you won't miss any upcoming episodes, and it sends me the message that you like the kind of content that I'm creating here. And finally, please share this video with someone who you think might benefit. What better gift can you give someone than the gift of better relationships and a better work experience? I'm really grateful that you were here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.